women. This meeting is in hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 2021. And so we are studying sexual misconduct within the Canadian Armed Forces. And we will let our witnesses have their 5 minutes of opening comments. If you need interpretation, look at the bottom. You can pick English, French, or the floor. And when you're speaking, please speak slowly and clearly for the interpreters. And when you're not speaking, your mic should be on mute. We are really pleased today to have Dr. Leah West, who is the assistant professor at Carleton University, and we'll begin with her 5 minutes of remarks. Go ahead, Dr. West.
Thank you for having me. With the brief time I have to do 3 things. First, introduce myself and how I found myself here today. Second, identify what I believe to be the root cause of the caste sexualized environment identified by Justice Deschamps in 2015. And third, to discuss the way forward. To begin, why am I here? I served in the CAF for 10 years as an armored officer. I graduated at the top of my class from RMC in 2007 and immediately took command of an armored recce troop. One Thursday night, at the end of my first year in my unit, I was sexually assaulted by a superior at a house party, well attended by other junior officers in my regiment. At work the next day, I was ill and passed out on the squatter's bathroom floor in an ambulance, and MPs arrived and took me to a civilian hospital. I did not know exactly what had happened to me the night before or why I was so ill. Almost everything after the first drink was poured for me was black, but I did know where and how I woke up.
There's issues with the, I can't hear anything she's saying, sorry.
I'm sorry. Is anyone else experiencing a problem with the translation? Yes, okay. We see there's a couple of issues. I'm sorry, Dr. West. We'll just pause while we fix this technical issue.
So as I was saying, I was assaulted at a house party. I don't know exactly what happened to me because everything that evening went black, but I do know where I woke up and the state I was in when I woke up. Standing over my gurney when I was taken to the emergency room, there were two male MPs who convinced me to have a rape kit done. I agreed, and it revealed intercourse, but no evidence of drugs. I never saw or heard from the MPs again. The following Monday, my commanding officer called me into his office, somewhere I'd probably only been about 2 times in my life. Prior to that, the MPs had informed him of what happened, and he looked at me and asked, "How do you want me to handle this?" And I didn't hesitate. I knew what I was expected to say, and I said it. "Nothing, sir." I told him that because I couldn't remember the exact details of the assault, I would modify my behavior and who I could trust.
Point of order. Can't hear her. Sorry. Sorry, Dr. West.
I'm so sorry, Dr. West. Clerk, I'm looking to you if you want to suspend and take care of the technical things. Perhaps you can call me.
Madam Chair, can you ask other members? Because I'm hearing everything clearly.
Yes,
So
I'm
can you
hearing
ask
everything
other
as well.
members?
I believe it may be a connection issue. I am hearing a little bit of reduction in sound. That's why I am not suspending. I don't want to interrupt Dr. West any further. However, if someone does lose connection or lose interpretation, if you could just raise your hand and we will suspend at that point. But at this point, I'm hearing no stop. Miss Matheson, do you hear a break in interpretation or?
Yes, and the echo is so bad that I can barely hear what Dr. West is saying. I think my situation is the same as Ms. Tahoda's and potentially Ms. Jim's.
And could I ask you if you were on the floor or the English interpretation?
I'm on the English interpretation. I can switch.
Can we go to the floor? Let's all attempt on the floor at this time and see if we can proceed. And please let me know just by raising your hand. And again, my apologies, Dr. West.
Yes, this is. I would just ask if you put your Monsieur Sauvé, did you have something to say?
I just wanted to mention, Madam Chair, yes, the floor works well. I'm on the floor, and we had the same issue in Natural Resources Committee. Anybody that was in English or French had problems, but the floor was working beautifully. So we had that issue on Monday, and I think there's other issues with other committees that if you're on the floor, it works well, but if you're in English or French, there's a problem.
Okay.
Miss Vanden Bell, do you have any issues hearing on the floor?
Yeah, no, on the floor, I have no issues, but I would also wonder if we could ask the witness if she's okay to proceed at this point, just because it can be very difficult to start and stop something that is such difficult testimony. So I wonder, Madam Chair, if we could just check in whether the witness is okay to proceed.
Absolutely, and I would ask that if we do proceed again, that members please not another interruption. This is a very sensitive subject and very difficult for the witness. Dr. West, do you feel you can continue?
Yes, I'm fine. Thank you, and thank you for your concern.
Very, very good. Go ahead.
Okay, so I told him not to do anything because I couldn't remember the precise details of the assault. I said that I would modify my behavior and who I could trust as if I'd been raped by a superior officer in my unit. He accepted my answer and we never spoke of it again. 4 years later, while deployed in Afghanistan, I was investigated without my knowledge by military police and my chain of command for having a consensual sexual relationship with a U.S. officer not in my same rank. The relationship was discovered when a male officer on my team accessed my email without my permission, found a deleted flirtatious email between myself and the American, and took it to my superior. They didn't need to investigate me. The day I found out what was going on, I admitted what I had done to my boss. My relationship violated regulations against fraternization in theater. I was charged, pled guilty, fined, repatriated from theater, and posted out of my unit. All of this I could accept. I had knowingly violated orders, and my repatriation impacted the operational effectiveness of my unit. However, what I no longer accept was that I was also called demeaning names, told I wasn't worthy of leading soldiers, and even threatened with violence by my commanding officer, and repeatedly chastised by other senior officers. For several months, I worked alone in an office with 4 workstations, managing a single Excel spreadsheet. The message was clear: my career in the regular forces were over. Eventually, when I was released, I even had a position with a reserve unit I'd been offered revoked. The new commanding officer told me I wasn't the type of leader he wanted in his unit. My experience is an extreme example of the double standard women in uniform face every day. My biggest failure in life, actions for which I was pushed out of the Armored Corps, and for which I continue to carry immense shame, is, however, allegedly precisely the type of leadership displayed by the man who ultimately served as this country's longest-serving Chief of Defense Staff. Yet for me, as a female Army captain, there was no hesitation to act on an email and remove me from my position. And that was the right call. We cannot turn a blind eye when military leaders put themselves and their interests before the mission. This ethical obligation is the foundation upon which any professional military operates. Serving Canada before oneself. This brings me to my second point. Where does this double standard come from? Why is sexual misconduct so prolific and even condoned in the CAF when the victims are women but not the wrongdoers? In my opinion, the sexualized environment identified in the Deschamps report is a symptom of 2 more fundamental issues at the core of the CAF's culture. First, women and men and their contributions to the CAF are not valued and respected equally. Second, the CAF continues to perpetuate deeply flawed and antiquated expectations about who women and men in the armed forces are supposed to be and correspondingly how they ought to behave. So how do we fix it? Given the time, I'll simply identify 3 recommendations. I'm happy to explain them further in response to questions. First, as we all know, we need an independent reporting mechanism. The government, I believe, should take interim policy and legislative changes to expand the mandate of the Sexual Misconduct Response Center to include independent investigations, and this can happen concurrently to the review by Justice Reservoir. Second, we must improve leadership training and officer cadet mentorship at the Royal Military College. RMC is the training ground of our future leaders, but it is also where these outdated and degrading perceptions of men and women in the forces take root. And finally, I believe the notion of zero tolerance for all forms of misconduct is unrealistic and unhelpful. Culture change in the CAF is a massive undertaking. Good people trying to do better will make mistakes. The cost of making those mistakes cannot be so severe that victims and observers hesitate to speak up and take action. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And now we are pleased to see Lieutenant General Jenny Carignan with us. Thank you so much, and for your perseverance with our technical issues today. You'll have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and you may begin.
Bonjour à tous, Madame.
Good morning, everyone, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It's a pleasure to appear before you today, along with Dr. West. I am Lieutenant General Jenny Carignan, recently appointed Chief Professional Conduct and Culture. I am honored by the trust placed in me by my appointment to this mandate, which, to say the least, will be complex and challenging. While our responsibilities encompass the entire defense team, my comments today will focus on the Canadian Armed Forces. For this change in culture to succeed, we will need to challenge our basic assumptions and guiding principles in building the professional soldier we need now and in the future.
I spoke last month about our military culture. There are many positive aspects to our culture. It allows women and men to develop the strength and the courage to put themselves into harm's way to defend Canada. However, some aspects of our culture command change, and we are at an inflection point. There is a gap between our existing culture and our professed culture. Moreover, for a mission-oriented culture such as ours, there is a belief that tasks are to be done at all costs, that people's well-being and operational effectiveness is a zero-sum game. This premise is false. When applied indiscriminately, it contributes to toxicity within our units. Treating people with dignity is not a trade-off for operational effectiveness. In fact, dignity is at the foundation of trust, and we must have trust in one another to succeed in the challenging circumstances we so often face together. La portée du mandat de cette nouvelle organisation.
Our first actions in this new organization will be to formalize the mandate and responsibilities, put the structure in place to carry out that mandate, undertake consultations with respect to professional conduct and culture, conduct a review of complaint processes and structures, and propose solutions. This culture change requires a sustained effort on the part of every member of the Canadian Armed Forces to ensure that our behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs are aligned with our values. That is why we are committed to building a Canadian Armed Forces that reflects and celebrates the uniqueness and strength of all Canadians. I feel encouraged and carried by the winds of change within defense, as well as the many expressions of support I have received over the past 2 weeks from various individuals and groups within and outside defense. We have a duty to do this properly once and for all. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
With Ms. Sahota for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today, and my sincere apologies, Dr. West, for the interruption. My question is to you, Dr. West. In its report entitled A Force for Change, Creating a Culture of Equality for Women in the Canadian Armed Forces, tabled in June 2019, the Status of Women Committee recommended that the Government of Canada provide mandatory, comprehensive sexual harassment training for all Canadian Armed Forces members and recruits, with training follow-ups on a regular basis. What training, if any, is offered within the Canadian Armed Forces on the topic of sexual misconduct, including sexual assault and sexual harassment?
Thank you for your question, and unfortunately, I'm not well placed to answer it. I retired from the forces in 2012. I believe General Carignan would be better placed to answer that question. I can only speak to the training that I received during my time, which is now quite outdated.
I can answer this question. The education on CAF values and ethos commence at the recruit schools, and all recruits, both officers and non-commissioned members, receive training on the profession of arms, the Canadian military ethos, and diversity. On top of this, they all receive training on preventing sexual misconduct in the workplace. So as an example, there's approximately 3 hours of training and validation, both through written exam and observation of the recruit performance during their training. So this is kind of the package that is put together at the front when recruits join the military.
So just a follow-up question to that, how does the Canadian Armed Forces ensure that all members receiving training about expected behaviors and the consequences of sexual misconduct?
So there is mandated training that then happens after recruiting training is over via the various units throughout the Canadian Armed Forces. What we are observing, however, is that training is not actually achieving the aim of reducing misconduct in any type of way. So we will have to revisit this training, and we will have to focus at the leadership level in providing tools for leaders to set an inclusive climate. So this is where we will put the emphasis on.
So once again, just to follow up on that, the training that's being provided, you said, is not effective. So can you list some of the other improvements other than working from the top down, starting from the leaders to the bottom? So can you tell me how that would happen and what steps are being taken?
So we will review the training, and this review is currently ongoing, taking a survey of the various training packages that are delivered currently throughout the Canadian Armed Forces. What we are noticing is that we have been forming people or telling people what not to do. We want to reverse this and put the emphasis on the behaviors that we are looking for. So the training is not going to be an Ottawa thing. The training is going to be delivered throughout all the units, throughout the Canadian Armed Forces, but also amongst our defense employees as well. And we want this to be focused on inclusivity, expectations on fostering an environment where people feel safe to provide ideas and offer different views and perspectives and establish trust between the team and the leader themselves. We are getting ready to issue guidance on the expected behaviors from inclusive leaders, and we are going to issue that in the next few weeks as a first initiative to kickstart the culture change momentum.
Do I have time, Madam Chair? How long have you known, or how long has it been known that the training that was provided or has been provided to date has not been working? And were there steps being taken, except for now, to improve the training?
Improving the training has always been a part of the lessons learned throughout this process. So as we deliver training package, there's also an assessment on the receptivity and if the training actually achieves the objectives that we're looking for. And this is fed back into the loop so that we modify training as we go. We have certain training packages that have had a lot of success and a lot of impact on the members who have been taking this training, and we've adjusted it as we went along. So it's a normal learning process by which we modify training as we field these various training packages amongst the force.
Very good.
Can we get a copy of the guidelines, please?
Yes. And now we'll go to Ms. Sidhu for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, our witnesses, for being here. And I believe our study need to be focused on the survivor's perspective. So, Dr. West, thank you for your sensitive testimony. My question is to Dr. West. What gaps presently exist throughout the reporting process, and what do you think could be done better to close them?
So again, I'll take it from my perspective, and I have been out of the forces since Operation Honor was put into place. My understanding is that all sexual assault is currently dealt with outside of the chain of command by MPs. So looking back on my circumstances, what happened shouldn't have happened if it happened 3 years later. But ultimately, I do believe that how everything shook out would still be the same with the current process that's in place. Had I been first approached by military police and they believed that they couldn't pursue criminal charges, my expectation was with an outside reporting process, my complaint would have been directed that way rather than to my chain of command. And then in having discussions about how to proceed, the question would have been conducted in a neutral environment where I could have been presented, hopefully, with all of the information to make an informed choice and not have to make that choice and have the person investigate the activity be someone who wrote my personal evaluations or who decided if I got a career course or what job I had next. To have that investigation take place outside of the chain of command is incredibly important. It's also important, I think, for trust in the confidentiality of the process that I don't think people trust will happen when it's the people you see every day, and the Army can sometimes be a gossipy place. So I really do think that it's necessary to have a neutral, impartial, independent body who can talk to survivors about their choice and then investigate this so that when making the decision, you don't feel like an investigation is going to impact every element of your current and future career. And also for the accused person's career, right? The accused person also deserves to have an investigation done, not by their chain of command, and have the full benefit of confidentiality. So currently, I think the system is quite flawed in that regard. I practice criminal law. The system simply cannot continue to be one that is decided by the same people that have extreme control over the future of your life. And that's the biggest gap that I see. And currently the process the Sexual Misconduct Reporting Center just doesn't really change that.
Thank you, Dr. West. Your input is very valuable to us. Next questions to General Kiernan. What is your vision for your new role as the Chief, Professional Conduct and Culture?
Madam Chair, the approach that we want to take with this new organization is, while we are listening and learning, we want to start working on the problem also at the same time. So a priority of mine will be to conduct a review of the complaint system. As Dr. West has been explaining, it is not efficient. It's very complex. We have many different tools that are resting in many different places within the D&D. And what we want to do is integrate and centralize this so that we have visibility and have a better complaint system. We're also going to be working with Madame Arbor very closely on this in reacting as fast as possible to the recommendations she will make along the way, so that we don't wait for many months for a report to come and then start working on the problem. So this is kind of the approach that we are going to take with this.
Thank you. Madam Chair, do I have more time?
1 minute.
Okay. To follow up, General Kiernan, what are the immediate and long-term steps that you will be taking to ensure meaningful and long-lasting culture in the Canadian Armed Forces and Department of National Defense?
So long term, we're going to realign our policies and our programs that address all kinds of misconduct within D&D and the CAF. Again, we want to improve the ways that the systemic misconduct is reported. I will want to also be in the space of prevention. We want to make sure that we create this environment so that it reduces the opportunities for these misconducts to happen, which is lacking currently. We want to give greater agency and support to those who have experienced misconduct as well, see it from the eyes of the survivors, Madam Chair.
Merci beaucoup. Madame Larouche, vous avez 6.
Thank you very much, Ms. Larouche. 6 minutes. Thank you to both witnesses for being here today. Dr. West, for your testimony, which gave us words for the reality of victims in the Canadian Armed Forces, and Ms. Carignan, the new Chief Professional Conduct and Culture. Congratulations on your new appointment. So you've climbed the ranks of the Canadian Armed Forces, and that is to your credit. Ms. Carignan, I'd like to hear more about your role. It's a new role. You talked about training. You talked about the complaint mechanism, working more closely with Ms. Arbour. So what role can you play for these cases of misconduct? What is the scope of your role?
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The scope will be confirmed and determined in the details over the next 2 months. The announcement was just made, so we need to properly clarify our mandate. I intend to have the mandate approved at the end of May, and then put together a proposal for a structure and the accompanying authorities, because all of that is connected. We need to have a mandate to build the proper structure to carry out that mandate with the accompanying authorities. What's important is that those authorities currently are in different places in the Canadian Forces and the department. So it's important to carry out our work well so we can determine what those authorities are over the coming weeks. But specifically, while we await clarification on your role and the scope of what you can do, so in the shorter term, perhaps, you've talked about working closely with the recommendations from Ms. Arbour, but we know what the 2015 recommendations were from the Deschamps report. Can you draw inspiration from that to put things in place as quickly as possible? And as I said, my question would be, what can you do while you're waiting to clarify your role and work with Ms. Arbour? Yes, we can still take action. We can make the changes we need to make. So the priority is to look at the mechanisms and the structure for complaints, which, in my opinion, is the priority. And we've heard that in testimony from survivors. That's why we're addressing that first. And I'm able to do that and propose solutions. The aspect we're working on in the media is preparing guidelines and clear expectations for what it means to be an inclusive leader. So here, we want to influence behavior so that our teams are able to have the tools to lead inclusive teams. So that's really in the short term. Those are the two short-term priorities. So I want it to be clear. We're working on the structure and building everything we need to do to properly do our work, but we're also able to work on initiatives currently. Very good. You also mentioned, Ms. Carignan, and Dr. West also mentioned sound cutout. So to take those investigations outside of the forces, Dr. West, you said you'd like to elaborate on your 3 recommendations. So I'd like to give you the opportunity to tell us more about your 3 recommendations in your opening remarks.
Thank you very much. I'll speak first to the idea about training of leaders, and we've heard already from General Carignan how we start by training recruits how to behave. RMC is the breeding ground, unfortunately, based on my experiences, of toxic culture that permeates the forces. It is where the majority of our officers are indoctrinated into the military, and is when officer cadets move into a training environment with other officers, they are the dominant group. They are the alphas in the training environment, forcing others to look to their behavior to conform. But the problem at RMC is that training is mostly done by senior officer cadets. Those cadets have very little experience in the actual military. Their understanding of military leader is often basic training and the training they get from other cadets and movies and TVs. In other words, it's fantasy and based on stereotypes. I really believe the officer and NCM ratio at RMC needs to increase, and those serving members need to be far more involved in the development of officer cadets at RMC. They can't simply file paperwork and do drill clinics on Wednesday mornings, and the people chosen to do the mentorship and leadership training of officer cadets need to reflect the diversity and qualities that the CAF wants. They need to have a record of leadership development and represent a diversity not only in terms of ethnicity and gender, but of leadership styles. And they need to be far more present in the lives of officer cadets.
Very good. And then we'll go to Ms. Matheson for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. I kind of want to, I think, expand on what Madame LaRouche was speaking about. And I know that these are early days, Lieutenant General Carignan, but have you been given any sort of idea? You've been given a huge role. Have you been given any idea in terms of what resources you will be provided? Is it something that's unlimited? Or are you aware yet of what supports you'll have from the federal government?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. It's a very important question, because we will need to be resourced to do our work properly. And I can assure you that I have received a lot of support, both from my colleagues, both from the DM and the CDS, and we are determined to push this change forward. So as we speak now, I am taking people away from various other organizations so that they can start this very important work that we need to do. And everybody is fully on board and setting their own priorities aside so that this can be moved forward. So an incredible support from across DND and the CAF to push our change agenda forward.
Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button for a second. So again, early days, but that composition of your team, do you have specific examples of the types of professionals, the exact roles that they'll play? Has that been narrowed down yet? Or do you have a vision of what that will look like? Sort of different groups working on different things all at the same time, or can you give us an idea?
Certainly. So this is all linked to confirming the mandate, but the way I see some of the various groups who perform duties across DND, for example, human rights, ethics, do all belong to different organizations within DND. the integrated center of complaint, plans and policies who now rest with different organizations, again, integrating that under one plans and policy on professional conduct. So this leads us to build an organization using the many tools that are already available across the board to perform our duties. So it's going to be clearer as I get the authorization and the approval to move forward, but I've been socializing a lot of these concepts and ideas right now, and then we're moving in a very good way to be able to put this into place in the next 6 months.
And we've heard a great deal about the Deschamps report. Clearly, it was put forward. There were clear recommendations. Dr. West mentioned them as well in terms of that independence, but a lot could actually be implemented immediately. Have you had the ability to speak to those in government within DND on the actual immediate implementation of some of the Deschamps report recommendations?
We're going to be building on a lot of work that has been done in actioning the 10 recommendations from the Deschamps report. So I'm not going to start from scratch. So there's a lot of initiatives and recommendations that have been launched forward, and then we will continue that work. So I'll just take, for example, recommendation number 2, which is establish a change of culture strategy to address the sexual misconducts. The path to dignity, which is the strategy, was published last fall. So I'm going to pursue this strategy now and apply it, and then move it forward in terms of application. So we're going to build on the work that has already been done in many of the areas of the 10 recommendations of the Deschamps report.
I'm trying to, so ultimately, in terms of that immediacy, I mean, you talked about moving very quickly. You talked about moving on the review process as well of Madame Justice Arbor. I mean, we haven't been also given sort of a timeline. And how quickly do you think a lot of this will take place? I mean, we certainly heard from other witnesses that they already believed that all of the recommendations of the Deschamps report had been implemented, but they had not, according to Justice Deschamps. So how soon do you expect or hope to see a lot of these recommendations in place directly, actively?
Well, again, a lot of these recommendations have been actioned and moved forward, but there's still a lot of work to be done. So I'm going to be moving on those. So we need to put a plan together to phase this work and move it along. So right now, this is what I need to do is to make that plan for DND. So just, we'll need a little bit of time to do this, but that's what I'm saying.
Very good.
We will address each with the time it needs to get done.
Excellent. And now we'll go to Ms. Alislav for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. General Carignan, when you were made aware, could you tell me when you were made aware of this position was being created and that you were to fill it?
I started to be informed of we were thinking of creating this organization at the end of March. So I was coming back from leave from my Iraq deployment, and so we had discussions.
End of March.
End of March, yes.
Thank you.
And
Do you have a job description and performance metrics, and could you table those for us?
no, this is not done yet. So this is what I want to get approval at the end of the month so that we can put the mandate, confirm the mandate, and then move into the structure that will support this mandate.
Would you be able to table that to this committee when you do have it finalized?
Of course, no problems.
Thank you very much. Now, we heard very discouraging testimony from Dr. West today. And in her testimony, she talked about the double standard and how when she was posted outside of the country, she had a fraternization with the US military as a junior officer, and she was fined, she was charged, she was repatriated, and she was drummed out of the Canadian Forces essentially through constructive dismissal. Now, we know that Lieutenant General Coates was also posted as the deputy commander to NORAD, which is one of the most significant positions for Canada's defense, and that he was guilty of a very similar offense. And yet, the media and the military has stated repeatedly that no rules were broken. So, could you help us understand, which is it? No rules were broken when you're on deployment fraternizing with the US, another person, or they were, and a general was not charged, was not fined, and was not repatriated, and is still serving in the Canadian Forces?
Madam Chair, I cannot speak to the particulars and the facts of the cases, but what I can say is that we have to make sure that the same rules apply to everybody. And this is part of the work that we will be doing, is to clarify these rules and policies for everybody. So this is the testimony that we have heard from many survivors. And I'll tell you that it is...
But General, we have Dr. West on the call, and she has a record for being charged for what appears and has been in the public to be exactly the same thing, probably of a significantly lower level of severity because she was a junior officer, not a 3-star general. I think if you could, we would like you to get back to the committee and give us some clarity on whether or not, in fact, no rules were broken in the case of Dr. West or in the case of a still serving Lieutenant General.
Madam Chair, I can tell you that I have been very touched and affected by both Dr. West's experience and the many other experiences that we have heard. And I am not taking this lightly, and I want to drive the appropriate change that will allow us to not have these cases in the future. And we are determined to make this happen.
General Carignan, we know of generals who are complicit either through their silence or their actions. What authority do you have to hold them accountable to ensure that their conduct is beyond reproach if they are holding such important positions?
Madam Chair, that's exactly what I meant in my opening statement about the gap between the reality and the values that we are espousing to and want to see happening. And we definitely have a lot of work to do in that sense. And this is exactly what I mean by bridging that gap and ensuring that people are held accountable.
Very good. Now we'll go to Ms. Zahid for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to both the witnesses. special thanks to Madam West for your powerful testimony. I know you need a lot of courage to come out. So really, thank you on behalf of all the members. My first question is for Ms. West. Do you think the military is capable of a transformational cultural change? And if so, what recommendations do you have that will help ensuring success for current and future members of the Canadian Armed Forces?
Yes, I do. I powerfully believe in the CAF's capacity to change because I know so many of the strong leaders that are still there that take this issue extremely seriously. Not just women and men, but my peer group is now at the commanding officer and subunit level command, and they are fiercely determined to bring about change now. The response to these allegations, to testimony like my own, has gotten far different responses from men and women in uniform than the Deschamps report in 2015. I believe the CAF has now accepted, at least the senior leadership has accepted the issue as a legitimate issue and is putting forward real steps to make change in a way that I do not believe was the case even 3 months ago. The appointment of General Carignan being one of the steps. The thing I would say most immediately is, while General Carignan talks about all of the necessary institutional changes that need to happen, which do take time, I believe that those, my friends, the subunit commanders, the commanding officers, need to be empowered to organically take steps to improve the culture within their own units and their subunits, and they need to feel empowered to do so by the chain of command. The CAF is going to change itself. It won't be an external report that changes the CAF, and it needs to happen not just from the top down, but from the bottom up. And it's a lot easier to happen from the bottom up in a hierarchical organization when you have leadership that empowers you and makes the mission clear.
Thank you, Ms. West. Thanks a lot for your answer. How can we encourage more survivors to come forward? Do you have any recommendations you think that any changes need to be made so that we can encourage more survivors to come forward?
I do believe the class action process is one way that survivors may take the opportunity to come forward through that reconciliation process. I hope that that process is kind of spurred forward by the momentum that we're seeing now. And I also believe that for survivors in uniform will come forward if they believe that they are going to be supported, if they believe that their chain of command will have their backs and that they will not face repudiation for coming forward now. But I also truly believe that we're not going to get out of this by punishing every man in the CAF who's misbehaved in the past 30 years. The Canadian Armed Forces needs to move forward by accepting its failures. And obviously there are those egregious abuses of power that need to be dealt with, but there needs to be acknowledgement, reconciliation, a chance to share, acknowledge, be sad about the culture, and then move forward all together on a new path. Taking down every single senior officer who's misbehaved in the past is not the way forward, I don't think.
Thank you, Ms. West. Madam Chair, how much time I have?
30 seconds.
Okay, no, I'll just take this opportunity to thank both the witnesses for appearing before the committee.
Very good. We'll go then to Madame Larouche, 2.5.
Ms. Larouche, 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Dr. West, I'd like to discuss your testimony again. You were a victim. You were asked to keep silence. There was a culture of silence around sexual assault. And the importance of the identity of victims not being made public. How can that mean that there's so much discretion? Well, could you elaborate on that and the fact that you were told to be silent?
Yes, thank you. It's hard to speak out in a culture where you feel like an experiment. And as a woman in the Canadian Armed Forces, especially in the combat arms, where I was one of very few, I went through all of my training. I was the only woman. I felt constantly like I needed to prove that I needed to be there, that I was an experiment, and that I was to conform and behave as I was expected to be. Thus, otherwise, I would be proven to not belong and to have failed the experiment for others. So when you feel like that, when something happens to you that doesn't happen to anyone else, and you're going to potentially rock the boat, take somebody down that's highly beloved, right? Someone I personally felt love towards as a brother, as a big brother. It's incredibly hard to speak out. And this is why I go back to the point about fundamentally, it's about women and men not feeling equal. And if you're constantly trying to conform to the behavior, this toxic masculine behavior, right, it's incredibly challenging to stand up for yourself, because the idea you have is that you have to be like them. And if you're not, you're wrong. You don't belong. And it'll just prove that you don't belong. And so you stay silent. And I think this is not just about sexual assault. It's also about the jokes, the showing of pornography, the ridiculous comments, the unwanted touching. It's all of it. And women and men need to be treated equally for that to stop. And that, I think, is the root problem that General Carignan has before her.
Very good. And now the last 2.5 minutes to Ms. Matheson.
So we've seen a lot of reports, reviews. It's not just the Deschamps report. There's the Auditor General's report. There's the report from this committee in 2019. Lieutenant General Carignan, I don't want this future review, this report, our report coming out of all of this now. I don't want any of that to be lost again. It needs to be acted upon. So how can this committee, in your opinion, how can this committee ensure that that happens? And I would like, this may be beyond my purview and we may have to do it in a different way, but I would like to ensure that you come back to this committee to report on your progress, potentially after you've had a bit more time to solidify your mandate and all of those things. Can you comment and provide a recommendation on what this committee can do to ensure that this isn't just another lost report?
Madam Chair, we will take on the recommendations. We will build mechanisms to measure what we are doing as well, which was another weakness of the implementation of OPHONOR. So we will have mechanisms in place to measure the effects of what we are doing, so that we can monitor progress. So this is from my part, this is what I can tell you that we will be doing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I have for today.
Very good. I want to thank our witnesses. I want to thank you for your testimony, for your service to the country, and for helping to affect change on this very important topic. We are going to suspend briefly while we do sound checks for the next panel. Welcome our witnesses. From the Department of National Defence, we have Brigadier General Simon Trudeau. Back again, Canadian Forces Provost Marshal and Commander, Canadian Forces Military Police Group. We also have Major General Guy Chapdelaine, the Canadian Armed Forces Chaplain General. And both of you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. And we will begin with Brigadier General Trudeau.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Committee for the opportunity to return here today to answer your questions and offer some reflections that I have had and the action that I have taken as the Provost Marshal since I last appeared. The work of this committee has given a voice to people who want to be heard, and I appreciate that this will foster positive changes. I want all members to know that I've been watching and listening to the testimony from these hearings. Like so many other people, I've been deeply affected and impacted by what I've heard from witnesses and from people who have come forward. It is clear from some of the testimonies that we can improve our interactions with victims. While we have taken measures in the past, from training to launching the Sexual Assault Review Program in 2018, I think we can do better in supporting victims who entrust us with their desire to pursue criminal investigations and preparing them for this process. As I explained during my last appearance, my role as Provost Marshal is to ensure an effective police force and that there is trust in the system. Trust that we will listen, trust that we will thoroughly investigate independently from the military chain of command, and trust that we will act when necessary. This is a serious moment for the Canadian Armed Forces, for the military police, and for the military justice system. Trust needs to be rebuilt. This moment requires immediate action, and I would like to tell you about some of the principal initiatives I have taken in response to what I've heard at this committee. I welcome your thoughts and views on these actions. Training. To build on a valuable trauma-informed approach training adopted by the Canadian Forces National Investigation Service sexual offense response teams, I have directed my team to take the necessary measures to incorporate this training into our foundational police courses at the Canadian Forces Military Police Academy, and to develop an action plan to provide this training to all MP personnel as soon as possible. This will ensure all frontline MPs recognize the importance of their role and the potential impact they can have when interacting with a victim of sexual trauma. Victim-centric approach. Victim support is at the forefront of what we do as a police service. To that end, and with a focus on learning and improving, I have sought the assistance and advice from Dr. Denise Preston, the Executive Director of the Sexual Misconduct Response Center, on 2 issues. First, we are working towards the professionalization of our victim services through the hiring of civilian personnel with relevant credentials and experience. We are doing this with the assistance of the SMRC, who will continue to work with us and the staff we hire to support consistent training and professional development. Secondly, I'm very eager to personally engage with and listen to victims of sexual misconduct and other crimes. In this way, as Provost Marshal, I can better understand the challenges that individuals face during the entire investigative process and how we can improve the human side of interacting with victims. Dr. Preston has kindly offered her expertise, and we are exploring consultation options and related considerations as we speak. I will also be consulting and collaborating with Lieutenant General Jenny Carignan in her new role as Chief Professional Conduct and Culture to help ensure that we are actively engaging outside experts to provide feedback on our operations. I welcome all of your thoughts and views on these actions and any questions you may have today. Thank you. Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Now we will continue with General Chapdelaine for 5 minutes. You can go ahead.
Madam Chair, I'm Major General Guy Chapdelaine, and since 2015, I have served as the Canadian Armed Forces Chaplain General. The mission of the Royal Canadian Chaplain Service is to develop and offer spiritual and religious care and support in order to ensure the spiritual well-being and resilience of all members of the defense community and Canadian Armed Forces families, while respecting the freedom of conscience and religion of each person. My role as the Canadian Armed Forces Chaplain General is to oversee chaplain recruiting and training, and to set direction and guidance for the provision of religious and spiritual care in accordance with Canada's defense strategy and the initiatives of the Canadian Armed Forces. Total health and wellness strategy. In addition to leading the chaplaincy, advise the Chief of Defense Staff on religious, spiritual, moral issues affecting defense team members and Canadian Armed Forces members' families. Chaplains have privileged access to Canadian Armed Forces members at all ranks, having no command authority, while ensuring privacy and confidentiality is respected. Chaplains provide an active and supportive presence and offer spiritual and personal growth, counseling, a variety of programs and special events throughout the year and across Canada and the globe. Le service de l'aumônerie royale canadienne.
The Royal Canadian Chaplain Service has undergone many important changes in recent years, notably to ensure and promote diversity among its ranks, including representation of women and a variety of spiritual beliefs. The Royal Canadian Chaplain Service is comprised of 261 regular force chaplains and 125 primary reserve chaplains. Chaplains serve in all elements of the Canadian Armed Forces, both domestically and abroad. 18% of regular force chaplains are women, and 16% of primary reserve chaplains are women. Currently, within our subsidized education program, which is part of chaplain recruiting, 30% of candidates are women.
1995, there were two chaplaincy services, one Protestant and one Roman Catholic. In 2003, we welcomed our first Muslim chaplain. Today, we are multi-faith chaplaincy representing many different traditions, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Sikh, Buddhist, and soon humanist. We understand that we must continue to build upon this progress, creating a safe work environment for female chaplains, as well as to ensure the CAF members we serve receive tailored support. I'm pleased to be in your midst to answer your questions.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. All right, we'll begin our questions with Ms. Sahota for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. General, last time you were here, you said, and I quote, "It was clear in 2011 when the Chief of the Defense Staff amended the command and control structure of the military police and adjusted the authorities, responsibilities, and accountabilities of the Provost Marshal. They were pretty explicit in regards to the CFPM having full command over all MPs involved in policing duties and functions. Also, as the head of the military police, the position of CFPM is independent of the chain of command." And the quote ends. Do you still stand by that statement?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Yes, I do.
You also touched on how you've been watching and listening to the witnesses come forward and tell their stories. Recently, we had a witness here before this committee, and she asked if the CFNIS had the mandate to investigate and the powers to lay charges against the CDS, and they refused to answer, and that the CDS at the time had said that he was untouchable because he owned the CFNIS. Given your previous statement, the recent testimony, can you shed some light on why the CDS would believe that he could direct what the CFNIS could and couldn't investigate?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. I can't speculate to what the CDS said, and it's also part of an ongoing investigation. But what I can tell you is that functionally, I am independent of the chain of command, and I have full command of the military police involved in policing, and we will investigate any allegation regardless of rank or status. We'll analyze the fact, look at the evidence, and lay charges as required.
Well, I'm not asking you to speculate. The witness said that CDS said at the time that he was untouchable because he owned the CFNIS, and your statement and testimony is different than that. Why would somebody believe that? Why would CDS believe that he was untouchable because he owned CFNIS?
I can't speculate to the frame of mind when he said that, but what I can tell you is that for policing, I'm independent from the chain of command.
In your last committee appearance, you gave the impression that there wasn't really a problem. However, just the other day, global news reporter Mercedes Stevenson, Mark Andrew Cossette, and Amanda Connolly published a rather disturbing article about the military police having a Facebook group where they were openly mocking a woman who appeared before this committee. They left statements such as giggity, a reference to a character in the adult show Family Guy, who is a misogynist, or her story is about as clear as PMQ orgy, party on payday. That same witness had also expressed how she doesn't believe that she will receive justice. And after reading a Facebook group comments, it is easy to see why one would believe that. General, this occurred under your watch and reinforces the toxic masculinity within the military and explains why women in general don't feel safe in coming forward and playing a big role into the reason why the military is struggling to meet its 25% women diversity quota. Do you still believe that there isn't a problem? Yes or no?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Regards to the article, with regards to the Facebook private page, I was, as the Provost Marshal, I was disappointed, deeply disappointed when I became aware of that article and the comments. And certainly I expect every military police member to be professional at all times, on and off duty, and respect the MP Professional Code of Conduct. And I take these matters of conduct very seriously, and I've referred the matter to the professional standards section, who will keep serving MPs, looking into that article, and they will keep people accountable as required.
So from what I heard, that you're disturbed that happened, but the steps you have taken, how are those steps going to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Because when we're talking about bringing change to the culture that exists currently, just being disappointed doesn't cut it anymore. The witnesses are coming forward and they're being put down, and it's public knowledge now. So what concrete steps are you going to take? Because this is happening under your watch.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Well, a concrete action that I've taken is certainly refer the matter for investigation for those serving MPs that would have made comments on that private Facebook page. I have reminded my commanders of the responsibilities that we have under the Code of Conduct, and any allegations of misconduct of MPs will be actioned with due process as part of the processes that I have at my disposal.
I'll let Leona ask the rest of the
Actually, you're out of time, so we're going to Miss Dillon for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here this morning. My questions will be for General Trudeau. I thank you for coming again to committee, and I've also noticed in your tone as well, I have to say, that it's more forceful and about addressing these issues. I thank you for that. I hear the passion in your voice, I guess, as much as a military person can display it. So I would like to ask you, please, over the past few months, survivors have been coming forward. You've been watching their testimonies and continue to do so with their experiences of sexual misconduct in the Canadian Armed Forces. These stories are heartbreaking, they're overwhelming, but they are crucial for the government, our government, to make this path come forward and completely changing the culture at the Canadian Armed Forces. What steps have you taken to ensure that the military police are adapting and evolving to better meet the needs of survivors? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Certainly, watching and listening to the testimony, because we're listening and learning as a professional police service. But personally, I've been moved by the testimony because, in those cases, the victims, we fell short of meeting their needs as victims. And that also moved me to action. And there's a number of action, as I alluded into my opening comments, making sure now that all MPs will receive trauma-informed approach training. I've reached out to Dr. Preston to accelerate the professionalization of my victim services. We absolutely have to meet the victim needs. In interaction with police, the first contact that a victim will have with a police will be very, very crucial in the confidence in the process. So I really want to focus my energy now on how we interact with victims, how we prepare victims for the investigative process, how we give victim a voice into options when they report. But I really want to make sure that it's seamless from the perspective of how we interact with victims and making them safe and secure. It's the same at a tactical level from a patrol officer to an investigator of the CFNIS, depending on where the victim reports the allegation, which is more often at the patrol level where the first responder will arrive on the scene or the victim will report to a patrol office. So I want to bridge the gap in training and skill set and knowledge that has been gained by the NIS over the years. I want to do a transfer of that skill set, knowledge, and training to the patrol section to ensure a consistent approach to how we interact with victims.
Thank you so much, General Trudeau. And I think that's an amazing approach where you mentioned that the first place a person decides to disclose is the patrolling officer. And this is most crucial because it could encourage or discourage somebody from speaking up and altogether abandon the process. So this is very important, what you just said, that we have to first look at the patrolling officer, the very first place where a disclosure will happen. Last time you were at committee, you spoke of a threshold of investigation. Can you please clarify what you meant by the threshold of investigation? And what examples you can give us that meet or do not meet the threshold? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. I think last time I was referring at the threshold of an investigation, either from the Uniform Military Police or the CFNIS. When we talk about sexual misconduct, any sexual criminal offense or Criminal Code of Canada offense must be referred to the CFNIS, who is mandated to do that. And actually, that change in policy was done, I believe, in 2015 as a result of Madame Deschamps' report. So the CFNI has become the sole referral authority for sexual criminal offenses.
And in your opinion, why is the use of a threshold necessary?
It's just to categorize the different types of investigations that will be referred to the CFNIS and those that will stay with the Uniform Military Police, a little bit like a civilian police force, where some offenses are referred to the Major Crimes Unit, some stay at the patrol section.
Okay, perfect. So it's a sort of a triage of the files.
Oui, exactement.
Okay, perfect. And you spoke during your testimony, you used a word I found very, very interesting and very crucial to this whole process. You spoke about the human aspect and how you're working also with your colleague Carignan. And can Can you talk to us a little bit about the human aspect and how you think that'll make things a bit different or a lot more different when it comes to reporting, addressing sexual violence or harassment in the Canadian Armed Forces? And in case I don't, our time runs out, I just want to say thank you very much for the work you're doing and your new innovative solutions. And I encourage you to keep doing this. So thank you.
Unfortunately, your time did run out, so we don't even get the response. Maintenant, Madame Larouche, 6 minutes.
Now, Ms. Larouche, 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, of course, to our witnesses for being here today for a second time at this committee. My first questions will be for Mr. Chapdelaine. I'd like to hear you elaborate about your role as Chaplain General of the Canadian Armed Forces. If I've understood correctly, a chaplain is at the front lines when a soldier experiences distress. Is that correct? Yes. Yes, chaplains as such. My responsibility is more to lead the chaplaincy. But yes, each chaplain, men and women, are invited to listen to the person who comes before him or her with a great deal of compassion, humanity, and accompany that person without judgment. Whether the person is a believer or not, that's not important. What we have before us is a human being who's in crisis or affected by a situation. We need to welcome that person and direct the person and guide them while respecting confidentiality, because confidentiality is important to build that trust. And with that person, lead that person towards the right resources, or just help that person to report something. Report what he or she has experienced. And of course, among those situations, here we are at the Standing Committee on the Status of Women, looking at sexual misconduct. So from your role and your position leading chaplains, these are the types of situations that I imagine some of you would have listened to, would have been there for people who need to talk about those situations. Is that correct? Yes. Yes, that's correct. So I'd like to hear what you have to say, and what is the level of distress? We talked about an increase, but are you seeing a rise or a decrease in reporting? And do victims hear that they are heard by the Canadian Armed Forces? I think it's very important, Madam Chair, that people feel not only heard, not only listened to, but also heard. I've been in uniform for 42 years, and I've seen a great deal of change in the Canadian Armed Forces. But I see that today, people need to express themselves. I hope they have more trust, that they can speak and express what they've experienced so that things change. Currently, I think there's momentum. There's a real desire for deep change to ensure the dignity of all of the men and women, especially those who are vulnerable. That's important for us. It's important to be there to hear them, and that's the first thing we need to do. To make these people feel comfortable so they can go further, and we need to help them in going further so they can report what they've experienced. That must be a challenge for you. You talked about the importance of anonymity in your role. How can you transfer those cases without compromising that anonymity? How do you reconcile that? I think it's by journeying with the person. We journey with the person and we create that trust. We respect the pace the person wants to move at. I don't impose my pace, but I follow the person's lead. I help the person, I trust the person, and tell him or her that things can change. And I think our role is very important. We're at the front lines. We're everywhere. There are 261 chaplains in the Canadian Armed Forces, in the regular force. And so that allows us to have chaplains in each unit. And they're not in the chain of command. There's no power to command. And so that increases trust because of that. Because of confidentiality that you can ensure. But so you accompany them. You say you accompany them during the process, but what guidance do you give them? Where do you direct them to? Do you direct them to certain resources? How far do you go in accompanying victims so that they can go further? Yes, we direct them to resources, be it the Center for Misconduct, for Sexual Misconduct, or the police. We can even accompany them, be there with them, if they desire, and all of the other resources that are offered in the Canadian Armed Forces, and ensure that the person is never alone. And we work together with the SMRC, the Sexual Misconduct Center.
On travaille ensemble pour s'assurer.
We work together to ensure that chaplains are available when they are called. They have the phone numbers. We always have chaplains available 24 hours a day. So we can be reached anytime. And we can provide support to people who want to report what happened. Thank you very much.
Lindsay Matheson for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to address my questions to the Provost Marshal. So under the questioning with Ms. Sahota, we went over again, you know, the last time that you were here, and you stuck pretty firmly to that idea that your office is entirely independent from the chain of command. You talked about the fact of being functionally independent. Could you expand on that, please?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. So what I mean by functionally is that my authorities, accountabilities, and responsibilities in my terms of reference clearly state that as the head of the military police, I'm independent from the chain of command, and that I have full command of all MPs performing policing duty and function. Those were the terms of reference given to me in 2011 when the Chief of Defense Staff put all MPs under the command of the Provost Marshal.
So there could be a difference between functionally independent and then there's a perception of independence, because certainly we heard from witnesses, you heard them as well, bringing testimony to this committee, that they were still impacted by the chain of command, that there were influences upon your officers. Is that more accurate, I guess? Is that what we could take from that?
Could you please repeat the question, the last part that I couldn't understand?
Ultimately, the difference, as you describe it, of being functionally independent and having what's written down versus what's thought of, what the experiences that a lot of victims have seen, that there's a difference there.
Okay, thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Yes, so dans les faits, like as we say in French, but when I say functionally is that for me, I act as an independent actor from the chain of command. I make decision independently from the chain of command. But I recognize, I acknowledge that there is a perception out there of the independence. And that can be problematic for as a barrier of reporting to the military police. So that for me, if it's a barrier, it is a problem. So I've had the opportunity to give my thoughts on the matter of enhancing independence to Justice Fish, who has done his review of the National Defense Act, and one portion of it is on military police. And I'll be looking forward to his recommendations and deliberations on how to avenues to enhance military police independence.
Right, because of course, and this sort of plays into perceptions too. I'd like you to sort of go back into when Mr. Hoda brought up the idea of this, or the fact that this Facebook group exists. Can you? There's certainly potentially the actions that will occur because of their actions within this Facebook group, and your actions in response to it. Could you outline specifically how you will ensure that the members of this group are given, receive different sorts of education to help them learn why what they did was wrong, and how you can alter the perception when people are coming to them for help? And we heard from Dr. West that the armed forces can be a gossipy place. So a lot of people know what's going on, even if it is a private group, people know. How you will ensure that those people in positions of power under your command will then provide supports and help to people looking for supports and help.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's certainly a challenging space for me because part of that group, they are retired military police personnel, and you know, those comments are certainly not helpful for the military police at large. But from a perspective of oversight and responsibility, I have it on the serving members, and I take the conduct of serving members very, very seriously. And I have multiple tools under the military police code of conduct to take steps to address conduct issues, as such as inappropriate comments or disparaging comments that would have been made on that Facebook page.
So could you be specific, like what kind of follow-up will occur to ensure that both these officers, these active officers, are provided with the ability to learn and actively correct their behavior, but also to ensure that people going to them for assistance to help, to be seen as people that can be trusted, will be in fact seen as those people within that command, within that support structure?
Yes, thank you for the question. So from a perspective of investigating, then the results of investigations are sent to the chain of command with some recommended avenues to address any misconduct, depending on what it is. But there is a due process, as any administrative process, to investigate and then inform the chain of command of what transpired, and then the chain of command has a number of tools to address the situation. But
okay, that's the end of your time. I'm going now to Ms. Alislav for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you again to the witnesses. And I'd like to follow on in that line of question, if I could, General Trudeau. Last time you were here, certainly you left me with the impression that everything is pretty much operating as effectively and perfectly and no challenges in the CFNIS and in the entire military police community, and that there really wasn't much that needed to be done differently by you and your organization. And when we then saw the Facebook post, and yet we've had media articles that say that testimony sometimes gets lost, that people perhaps don't get charged, or that different charges are laid differently in different situations, I'm having some trouble understanding how people would have the trust in the system if in fact that would true. So do you believe that there are some challenges that you need to address, or is everything pretty much operational as effectively and nothing needs to change?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. As I stated in my opening comments and some of the testimony that I gave, I think there's things that we need to improve internally to the military police for the interaction with the victims, from some training that we give our police officers. I think that the human, the personal aspect of when the victim comes in, feels safe and secure, either from the patrol officer to the NIS, is that person throughout the process feels safe and supported and listened to. And one thing that we're focusing on, and I've had numerous discussions with CONIS on this, is what we call the preparation phase of the victim. A victim comes into the police to talk about what's next in the process, to talk about options, encourage the victim to ask questions, because we could be in a situation where a victim reports.
Thank you, General. Okay. But what about the actual investigation process? Are you confident that every investigation is meeting the rigorous standards that you've set? Do you have an internal audit ability to verify and double check that the attitudes, behaviors, and structural process is being met by all of your military police, regardless of what rank or authority they might be investigating?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Yes, I'm confident that the investigations are professionally and thoroughly conducted. Facts are gathered, evidence is analyzed, and charges are laid as required. Every investigation is different, and they're treated as that. But I'm confident in our ability to fully investigate allegations reported to the CFNIS or the military police.
But how do you know? What oversight mechanisms do you have in place? What internal audit? And in the case of the Facebook post, how would you have found out that this was the attitudes and behaviors of your military police had there not been a newspaper article?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Certainly from quality control or quality assurance, so we have a program within the CFNIS to continuously do quality assurance of our files to be aligned with policies and SOPs in the conduct of files. We also have, from an oversight perspective, there's also the Military Police Complaints Commission, who is charged to as an oversight body of our policing duty and function.
So we heard earlier testimony from Dr. West, where she was charged and fined and repatriated because of a fraternization situation. We also know that Lieutenant General Coates, the deputy commander of NORAD, was guilty of a similar offense, but yet was not charged or fined or repatriated. So could you shed us some light on whether no rules were broken, or in one case the individual, Dr. West, was wrongly charged and fined, or whether, say, Lieutenant General Coates was wrongly not held accountable for breaking the rules?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. I cannot comment on those investigations. I have no specifics to that.
But in general, would you be looking to see if they were broadly looked at across the board?
We will now move to Mr. Sede for 5 minutes. I'll give my time to Ms. Vandenbeld. Thank you.
Thank you very
Ms.
much.
Vanderbilt.
Thank you. And thank you to both of our witnesses for being here today. General Trudeau, thank you for being here once again. And I would note in your opening remarks that you were very, you mentioned, of course, the current circumstances and the things that you're learning from much of the testimony that we've heard in this committee and elsewhere, and that you are looking at things like professionalization and bringing in outside experts. Why is it important to have outside expertise in order to improve the processes that we have right now?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. It is important because we get different perspectives and how to improve our processes and how we can better meet the needs of the victim. And we used that process very effectively in 2018 in the sexual assault review program when we instituted an external review team and came and looked at some of our files. And, you know, moving forward, I'm giving some thought to maybe call in an ERT to review some of their processes more related to how we interact with victims. And I'm in discussion with Dr. Preston and how I can improve. And I'm looking forward to have the opportunities to engage with victims to learn more about their experience and how we can improve our processes in our program overall. You know, we hear things like duty to report, duty to respond. But I think for us as a police service, we have a duty to protect the victims and make them safe. And that's the message that I'm keeping with me moving forward and taking actions in that regard.
Thank you. And you mentioned that you are working closely with Dr. Preston and the SMRCs, the Sexual Misconduct Response Centers, also with General Karen Young, who we just had as a witness. And I noted also that you have provided some recommendations to Justice Fish in his review of the justice system. Madame Arbour, in her terms of reference, also includes a review of the justice system. Could you talk a little bit about the work that you are doing in conjunction with all of these other with SMRC and others? Talk about how you're working together to make sure that we improve the process as a whole.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. So with SMRC, to improve the process is really get expertise on victim services and how we can get better. As mentioned in my previous appearance, we have an NIS member as a liaison officer embedded with SMRC, where a victim who want to stay anonymous and understand the process, they can tap into that resources, who will explain the process, and if victims are willing to come forward, then he will facilitate the transfer of the file. So we've been working closely with SMRC since its creation, and we're going to continue our collaboration to improve my process because there's a lot of expertise in SMRC, and they can help us get better at meeting the victim's needs. I think that's important.
And I very much appreciate your recognition that the victims, the survivors, those impacted, their needs are not always met in reality, and your efforts to try to make sure that we improve those processes. You use the term victim-centric, which of course is also a big part of Bill C-77, the Victims' Declaration of Rights. Can you talk a little bit more about how you are modifying and adapting the way in which you do investigations based on the survivor testimony, based on looking at it so that your focus really is victim-centric?
Thank you for the question. So as alluded in my opening remarks, first thing from an action that is taken was to make sure that all MPs get the trauma-informed approach. I will take the training myself. All my senior officers will take the training. Every MP in the Canadian Armed Forces will have to take that training. That's how seriously we see this. And then we'll adjust the training from, the focus, and I want to see even from quality assurance. I've talked to some of my senior MP commanders to, when you do quality assurance on a file, pay particular focus on interviews with victims to make observations on empathy, listening skills, and then feedback back from the chain of command locally to the investigators, and looking at professional development sessions to really improve our service, again, to as much as possible meet the needs of the victim.
Very good. And now to Madame Larouche, 2,5.
2.5 minutes, Madame Larouche. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Once again, I'd like to thank Mr. Chapdelaine, the Chaplain General, and I'd like to now address my questions to Mr. Trudeau as Grand Marshal of the Canadian Armed Forces and Commander, Canadian Forces Military Police Group. Earlier, you talked about the appearance of independence. I'd like to hear you elaborate on that. And we've talked about the importance of anonymity for victims. What could the consequences be for victims that they've reported something and that they feel that they've had consequences because they reported? And regarding Mr. Vance, if there's an investigation on him, when will he know it and what will he found out? So just to clarify your independence. Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Do you mean when will he know? When is it? It's public. At what moment did he find out? So I'm going back in time here regarding the investigation. If I can speak generally, a complaint is received at the police service, an investigation is undertaken, and then it's a process. Depending on the investigation and the nature of the investigation, there's a time when the person who's the subject of the investigation, well, we'll interview that person or speak to that person. So each investigation is different. When the person or the circumstances under investigation are informed, well, there's a slew of factors that affect that, the integrity of the investigation and other factors. So without the person having all of the details of the investigation underway, we've heard from victims who've told us that Mr. Vance felt above everything. And the victims have spoken about consequences. So I'd like to talk about that independence and the anonymity of victims who felt that they weren't protected far too often. So you say you've been listening to the testimony from victims and recommendations. So I'd like you to talk about anonymity and how we can better protect victims so they can have trust and report. I'm sorry, that's the end of your time.
It's 2.5 or 2.5 for you.
Mr. Trudeau, you spoke about the training and your commitment to that training. Do you see this as a something that would be yearly? A few times per year? Or what plans do you have in place?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. I think this is an important question. It can't be a one-time training. It has to be ongoing and enduring. And I've been reflecting a lot in the last few weeks, and I'm starting to have kind of a strategy in my head that I think we're going to need to develop a victim support strategy that will have a number of building blocks into it, including leadership, the ongoing commitment of MP senior leadership into the importance of victim support. We're going to have a building block that is internal, external partnership with stakeholders to help us improve training and continuously meet the needs of the victim. We're going to need training at all levels of the military police at different stages of their career, annual refresher, foundational courses, and also, most importantly, performance monitoring on how we do to inform and how we do well. Because there's so many things that we do, but I think a enduring strategy would help us better meet the victim's needs and make sure that training is enduring within the military police and stays as a priority.
Thank you. And for Mr. Chapdelaine, we talked a lot today about broken trust
And you talked a lot about how incredibly important that relationship of trust is with the people that you speak with. Going forward, do you believe that we're moving in the right way? The armed forces are moving in the right way to regain that trust. Do you see this? What positive steps? What recommendations do you have on that alone?
Thank you for this important question, Madam Chair. The importance of trust, and we have to regain trust. I think we have some lost of trust right now in the Canadian Armed Forces. It's like a storm. We are passing through a storm. We need to regain this trust, and starting from the soldier to the general, nobody should be above. It should be the same standards for everybody. And this trust, as I mentioned, is very important. And we're dealing with a very difficult situation right now with the duty to report. Where I would like to see a duty to respond will be much more appropriate, especially for us, for chaplains and healthcare providers also, because we cannot have this duty to report and not respecting the confidentiality, because we re-traumatize the people affected or the victims. And I think it's important that we are faithful to this trust that we have with the person who is coming forward. It's very difficult for this person to come, and it's important to respect this confidentiality.
Very good. And I think we have time for a brief question each. For Ms. Shin, we'll start with you, and then I think it'll be Ms. Van den Beld, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, Mr. Sray. Okay, let's go with Ms. Shin first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In our first panel, Major General Karanen stated that training is not achieving the aim of reducing misconduct in any type of way. This is a serious assertion, and we should all be alarmed. Dr. West expressed that the RMC is the breeding ground, unfortunately, of toxic culture that permeates the forces. It is where the majority of our officers are indoctrinated into the military. But throughout the committee meetings, I can't help but conclude the reality is it doesn't matter what institutional changes happen or what systems are set in place. If the change doesn't happen internally within the individual's mind and heart, change is superficial and only optics to satisfy a regulatory mandate. So there must be personal accountability. Major General Chapdelaine, your chaplaincy permits you to help members probe the deepest parts of their heart. Based on your experience or experiences of other chaplains, of the members who come for care without breaching on confidentiality, have men who have committed sexual assault or misconduct ever come to you for help? And if so, what kind of help are they looking for? What personal counseling is available for men in the CAF? Is the support used? And are the men who receive allegations or complaints recommended to receive counseling services?
It's a good question. Yeah, it's important because we, as chaplains, we welcome the person. It could be the victim, could be the perpetrator also can come forward and ask for help. It's possible. It's why it's so important to be, of course, we cannot do the same person can do the both side, but to provide support to any people who are coming forward. Do we have we are not alone. We are working together. We are working with the police. We are working with SMRC. Dr. Preston and I, we have bilateral regularly looking for the training of the chaplains, because it's important also we cannot say that the chaplains are trained and it's over. No, we need to make sure that they have the trauma, also training, make sure that they are up to date to see and to know all the supports, and providing also support for those who have been the perpetrators of the situation, difficult situation.
Very good. And final question now to Monsieur Serret.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. General Trudeau, what are the additional factors that you think should be considered for CAF members who serve outside of the country? What changes do you feel are necessary to encourage more victims and survivors to share their experience? Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think raising awareness about what the police does and the changes done in regards to training and how we can better receive victims so that they can trust the system, trust in their police service. Because no police service wants to lack public trust. They want to be able to do their work. So our job is to serve people, and it's important to take the necessary measures and look at what we can change going forward, and also communicate those changes to people so that the defense community has greater trust in their police service.
We're going to end it there. I want to thank both of our witnesses for your testimony today, and I know that we will make a difference when we submit our report and see the changes that are coming. For the community members, we will for sure see you Thursday. We're going to commence and hopefully finish our unpaid report. Is it the pleasure of the committee to adjourn?
Madam Chair, could I just make sure that the request for the tabling of General Carigna's mandate performance objectives is put on the record and followed up?
Very good. I see the clerk nodding. Very good. All right, the meeting is adjourned. We'll see you Thursday.